Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Today we are joined by Mike McAllister of Sports Illustrated talking a little Syracuse football. Mike, thank you for coming on the show.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
What I want to start with is just what are the fan sentiments? What's the vibe around the Syracuse program with Dino Barber's coming into his seventh season? It's been an up and down road. I mean, a couple of years ago, we're talking about him maybe taking a job at Florida State, coming off a 10-3 season, and now it seems like he's on the hot seat. What's the feel like in Syracuse?
Yeah, it's funny because after last season ended and they didn't get to a bowl game, I think the fan base was pretty split on whether or not they wanted Dino back, whether they thought he deserved another year to try to keep that continuity and whatever else.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason why some wanted him to stay was the concern that if he left and you get a new coaching staff, do you lose a ridiculous talent like a Sean Tucker, right? Does he end up going into the transfer portal and you lose, the best running back that you've had maybe in 40, 50 years, maybe ever. So that was part of it, I think. But we've also seen him do it, right? We as you mentioned, in 2018, they had the 10 wins. So there was definitely a large, I wouldn't say a large, but a vocal portion of the fan base that wanted him gone, didn't care if there was collateral damage with players leaving. Their main goal was get the right coaching staff in place, and they didn't think that he was it. So given that backdrop, I think since those that didn't want him back have dealt with the fact that he is coming back, everything that's happened since then has really been positive, and I think has a lot of fans excited about the potential of what this team can be. And they feel pretty good about the defense, and you feel pretty good about most places offensively outside of the quarterback position. That's really where the biggest question mark is. So I think in a lot of ways, with the new coaches they've hired, with the additions they've made to the roster, there's, I think, some hope, a little bit of enthusiasm going into the 2022 season.
Yeah, so let's get to that quarterback group, as you just kind of mentioned. Obviously, Garrett Schrader coming in, much more of a running threat. Seemed like that offense kind of went a little one-dimensional towards the end of the year. Obviously, with such a talent like Sean Tucker at the running back position as well. Just land your transfer in Carlos Del Rio Wilson from Florida. Is he competing for a job there?
Yeah, I think he's going to be part of it. It's going to be him, Dan Villari, and Garrett Schrader. I also think this probably means that you won't see Justin Lamson as part of that because he suffered an injury. He's out indefinitely, is the official word. But I think if there was a reasonable expectation that he would be back and be ready to compete and basically be back to full strength by the time training camp hit, I don't think you see this move. I think this move was because they needed somebody else to feel good about A, the competition, and B, the depth, and see the talent that you have in case Schrader struggles or he gets hurt or whatever the case is. I still think that Schrader's probably the favorite going into training camp to be the guy. He showed a lot last year. I also think that the highlight moment for him as a passer was the game-winning touchdown pass against Virginia Tech, when he threw the touchdown pass to Damian Alford in the final 30 seconds, whatever it was, to win that game on the road. And he got hit really hard on that throw. And you could see him stay down for a minute. He came off the field, and there were some rumblings that he wasn't quite 100%. And even though he wasn't a great thrower prior to that, he looked a lot worse after that. And so I'm wondering if there was some lingering effects in those final, 3-4 games, whatever it was, with his ability to throw the ball, and teams just basically dared him to, and he couldn't. But previously, even though he wasn't a great throwing quarterback, he could still complete some basic throws that in the final 3-4 games, he was really struggling to complete. So I think with a new quarterbacks coach, new offensive coordinator, there's some hope that he can improve there. You don't need him to be Peyton Manning throwing the ball. You just need him to be an average,
serviceable
Power 5 thrower of the football. And with his legs and with the other things you have there with a Sean Tucker, I think that's sufficient enough. But Carlos Del Rio Wilson coming in, He's the highest rated recruit of the group.
Yes.
He might have the highest ceiling and be the most talented of the group. He's a little bit behind Garrett Schrader and Dan Villari because they both participated in spring
Yep.
ball, even though it's a new quarterback coach and a new offensive coordinator. But he's very talented, and
Yeah.
sometimes talent wins out. So he's got his work cut out for him, but he certainly has a chance to compete in that job and potentially win it.
So I'm happy that you mentioned the potential injury concerns that Schrader had kind of towards the back half of the season, because that is where you saw Syracuse. The wheels kind of came off on offense a little bit. Don't watch a ton of Syracuse football. I'm a Wake Forest guy, so I did watch the Wake Forest game where it was a great game. It was a
really fun game.
Unfortunately, I had Wake Forest to cover 5.5 points, so that was brutal. But anyways, gambling aside, Syracuse was competitive with a lot of teams. I mean, 3 points against Wake, 3 points against Clemson. Like the record 5-7 obviously leaves a little bit to be desired, but I think the product on the field was a little bit better than people are probably giving Syracuse credit for. What I want to ask you about is I don't have many questions about Sean Tucker. I had some questions about the quarterbacks that you were able to answer. Who's the guy? I mean, Taj Harris transfers out mid-year. I believe he's going to Rutgers now. Was going to Kentucky. Now it's going to be Rutgers. Who's the wide receiver on the edge that's going to give a little bit of some explosiveness to this offense that I think it lacked a little bit towards that back half of the year?
It certainly did. There's no question. I think Damian Alford's probably the guy that you look for. He showed flashes of being able to do that last year, and then normal growth and development over the course of a year. You hope that he takes that next step. I think CJ Hayes, the transfer from Michigan State, is interesting. I know that he was back on the depth chart during spring ball, but that was more so he was just getting integrated into the system and all of that. So he's an interesting one to watch. I think Courtney Jackson in the slot, he put up huge numbers in high school, like video game type numbers. He had a year where he had like 1,900 yards and 20-something touchdowns. Like, I think that was his junior season. Wow. I mean, he put up monster numbers. And he's got the potential to be a playmaker. He's just got some consistency issues with his hands and route running and some technique things or whatever. But I think he's got the ability to be an explosive playmaker there. So perhaps he can put that all together this year. Those are the two guys I think that make the most sense. But there's one guy that's on the younger side that I think is worth watching, and that's Oronde Gadsden.
Okay.
He is the son of former Miami Dolphins wide receiver Oronde Gadsden, played in the NFL for several years. And he was someone that I heard on multiple occasions was having a strong spring. So I don't know that he's going to crack the starting lineup. He could be someone that just rotates in and out as they like to rotate their receivers, but he's someone that could end up being a playmaker for him or a solid third down wide receiver. He's kind of someone I would keep an eye on as maybe that third or fourth receiver that makes some plays here or there.
Makes a lot of sense. I know that's probably one of the bigger holes you want to see Syracuse take a little bit of a step forward in is that explosiveness on offense. I think the last 3 games of the season were only averaging like 3.5 yards per play. So it really did kind of, the wheels fell off a little bit. The offensive line is going to be important. Obviously, Syracuse wants to run the ball behind, in my mind, a top 5 back in the country in Sean Tucker. How are we looking on that offensive line? I know you guys are losing a few guys. I do like Matthew Bergeron. I've heard a lot of good things from him. Who else on that offensive line do you think is going to step up? Do you have any problems with the depth and so forth?
They've got to stay healthy. I think if they stay healthy, everyone feels pretty good about where they're at. Right tackle is probably the spot where there's the biggest question mark. Kalen Ellis, who is right now one of your guards, he was a true freshman last year, but he was pretty impressive when he had to fill in due to injury. And I know the coaching staff is very high on him. As you mentioned, Matthew Bergeron is a really solid left tackle. And he's actually on NFL draft boards as someone who could come out after this season as, 4th, 5th round pick, something like that. And given the defenses they're going to be going up against this year, if he has a really solid year, plays well against the Clemsons and the Notre Dames and the Florida States, he's going to have an opportunity to improve his draft stock. But you feel pretty good about that. Right guard Chris Bleich, there was a lot of hype around him going into last year. When he was out there, he played very well. They ran the ball much better when he was out there. And he was hurt and missed games. I He missed 3 or 4 games, I think, in total during the season, but wasn't healthy down the stretch of the season. The hope is that he'll finally be healthy this year. He's an important piece. But center with Carlos, it's going to be either Carlos Vettorello or Josh Aloa. And Vettorello was okay, but he's got some weaknesses to his game. And then right now at right tackle, they've got Dakota Davis there, but I don't think they love having Dakota Davis there. I think they'd prefer almost to move him down either to guard or center, and then have Kalen Ellis either slide into center or perhaps be the primary backup at guard, and have someone else at right tackle. So that means either an Anthony Redd takes a step forward this offseason. I know they like his potential, or maybe even bringing someone in, a junior college or transfer prospect that can come in and compete for that right tackle job. I don't think that's out of the question to add someone there.
We've seen a lot of teams try to fill in and go to the JUCO ranks, go to kind of the FCS level to fill in that offensive line spot. How many guys on the roster right now going into fall camp might add a few transfers during the summer? How many deep are they? Do you think they're comfortable playing? Sounds like maybe 6 or 7
at offensive line. Yeah. I would say probably 7. I think Anthony Redd and Josh Iloa that they would feel okay playing.
Yeah,
even Darius Tisdale, who he has played at both tackle and guard for them. So I don't know that they want to rely on him as a starter every week, but having him being able to fill in or come in for a couple possessions or give a guy a breather, he's still a guy because he can play multiple positions and he has experience. He's still a guy that if they had to, they could play. But yeah, I think probably it's 7-ish that they're comfortable playing. Gotcha. I think they'd like to add one more guy to push that to 8 to feel a little bit safer.
Yeah. And let's flip to the defensive side of the ball, which doing prep work for the show, I was sneakily a pretty good defense there in Syracuse. Starting with the front 7, impressive in the box scores. I know they lose Cody I don't know how to say his last name. Roscoe. Who led the team in sacks, I believe, but they averaged over 3 sacks per game. We're top 20 in the country with in sacks. Oh, who's stepping up here, kind of continuing putting pressure on the quarterback and in the backfield?
Yeah, the defensive line is their biggest question mark on the defense because they lost all 3 starters from last year. But the back 7, the 3 linebackers and their secondary, they feel is good, talented, deep, athletic. Their linebackers led by Mikel Jones. He's the guy. He was first team All ACC.
Yeah,
he's gonna be an NFL draft pick. Stephon Thompson and Marlo Wax, both a couple of experienced youngsters, but they're explosive off the edge. They're playmakers, really solid players. So those are Thompson and Wax are going to be 2 of your guys that you're going to look at as your guys off the edge, at least right now, because of the question marks in the defensive line. But with who they have along the defensive line, Steve Linton is someone who has shown some flashes as a pass rusher. And Caleb Okechukwu, he was a reserve last year, but he played quite a bit and had some really good moments. He forced a couple of fumbles. He recovered one. So he's shown the ability to rush the passer. The question is, can he do it as the full-time guy now, where he's not just coming in and rotating in and being fresh when the other guys, giving him a little bit of a breather. So there's some question marks there, but I think there's some guys that they like the talent and the upside. It's just, they're on the inexperienced side.
So still playing that 3-3-5 look.
Yes.
Which is normally conservative, trying to stop necessarily the big play. Do we think this defense is going to be a top 25 defense again this year, or maybe taking a step forward, taking a step back?
That's certainly the hope. Now, it's actually possible because of the schedule that the defense overall could be better and they might not be ranked as high. Because you got to think they're playing against Purdue that has a reputation of being a high-flying offense. They're playing against Notre Dame that's usually a team that puts up a lot of points. They're playing a Louisville team that last year down the stretch was putting up a lot of points every game, including they put up 40-something against Syracuse. So they've got a lot of good offensive teams that they're playing against. They have to play at Wake Forest. They got to play at Boston College, who gets their quarterback back. So they could be a better defense,
not necessarily show it in the scoreboard.
But the statistics might not necessarily reflect that. They might not be a top 25 defense, but they're going to be a good defense. And I think it's going to be a unit that everyone's going to feel pretty good about and rely on and not really worry about, especially in the back end. Coaching staff and the fans love the linebackers, and the secondary depth is just honestly, it's unreal. It's as deep a secondary group as I've seen at Syracuse in quite a long time.
Love to hear that. What I want to ask you is kind of season projections. If you want to throw out a prediction, you're certainly welcome. What do we think is a reasonable season, a successful season there for Dino? Keeping his job, obviously, is the goal. But what do you think is reasonable expectations for the fans this year for Syracuse football?
I think it's reasonable to expect to get to a bowl game. You start there. If you get more than that, fine. Honestly, I think if they play last year's schedule, I think they get there. They might have a shot to get 7 or 8 wins.
Yeah.
But you're replacing Rutgers in your non-conference schedule with Notre Dame. That's obviously a huge difference.
Yeah.
So that takes a game that's very winnable and turns it into one that would be considered a massive upset. And then you're playing some teams like Wake Forest and Boston College, et cetera. You're playing them on the road instead of at home. Now you do get Florida State at home instead of on the road, NC State as well. But, and then you've got Purdue that you've added in as a non-conference opponent. And, so it's, they've certainly got their work cut out for them. Virginia as their crossover team, instead of getting like a Duke or North Carolina or Virginia Tech, that have some issues of their own. I think Virginia, given what their quarterback is bringing back, and they're going to be expected to be an explosive offense. So Syracuse is certainly going to be tested, but figure out a way to get to 6 wins. That has to be the expectation. I think it should be the expectation for any Power 5 program that's trying to establish themselves on a year-to-year basis. And Syracuse is no different. If they get to a bowl game, Dino's fine. If they don't, I don't know that necessarily means he's going to be gone. It would depend on how they didn't get there. There's a lot of factors.
It'll be getting hot, though.
Yes, it certainly would. And the fan base that was loud about him coming back last year would be even louder this offseason.
Yeah, gotcha. And as a Michigan fan, I know how the crowd that wants to coach gone is always the loudest, the loudest on social media.
Always.
So I think most people wanted Jim to stay, but you always heard the people on Twitter who didn't want Jim to stay. Mike, appreciate you guys coming on. If you guys like Syracuse football, you like college football, you like ACC football, go check out his work. I check it out. This is kind of how I did prep work for this, is looking at his content. Appreciate you coming on. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.